Two things to show off today here. One is the new foot. The new foot shell. Okay, printed it in two pieces again. As per my last video, it printed out to the correct size this time. As you can see here. Hopefully you can see here, there's a little bit of glue residue there. Lines up with that edge. And lines up with that edge. And it's flat. So good news there. This piece is held in place by glue. A little bit of blue tape there. Glue and a couple bolts. This one's 10mm with a captive nut, and this is 15mm with a standard nut on the end. Same thing on that side. So put the glue and then put the nuts and bolts in there. I used, see a little piece left here. I used some blue painter's tape to drape over this edge and down the front, as this is the front of the foot. This is where the battery cables, the cables that hoses, whatever you want to call them, that come out and go to the battery box. Battery box sits here. So this is the front. So I wanted, if there's any error in size, I wanted the front to look flush, and then any issues be on the back side where nobody will see it. But it turns out that it's pretty dang close to being perfectly flush on both sides. I think just this very bottom lip here ended up being a little bit off, but the other areas are pretty much flush. That's pretty much flush. So it looks like the front, just this part of the skirt here, is a little bit higher here, which is just going to be able to be sanded, blended in, and so it won't even be noticeable. So really happy with how that turned out. Again, like the last time, I used a cheap Radio Shack 45-watt soldering iron, and I took extra filament. And first I took the soldering iron and melted a line down where the two pieces meet that kind of joins them together and creates a trough. And then I took extra filament, glued it, kind of tapped and glued it in place, and then went back over with the soldering iron to melt it more and smooth it out across the two pieces. This one glued together really nicely, but I did go ahead and, if you can see it there, just light cross hatching to just melt a little bit of that seam together. Melted this seam together, and again, the reason it's dark is dirty soldering iron, or I might have got it a little bit too hot where it started to burn the plastic, but I think it's just dirt from the soldering iron. And then this one I left alone, and then I put a little bit up here. Theory being this one should be easy to sand flat, and it's also, you know, very bottom and not really noticeable if it doesn't get perfectly smooth, although I'm sure it will be because that was really a good join. This piece I'll just put a little filler material in just to make sure that the little bit of seam is filled. And then this piece here is another angle, but it's flat, if you know what I mean. It's flat there, so that should be able to sand really easily. And then just a little bit of filler in that area to hide that seam. So happy with how that came out. I have not glued the magnets in yet. So I have magnets in these foot shells pieces, or the side plates, but not in the foot shell. So if I hold it in place, it lines up really nicely. So that should be good. So next steps on this, maybe sand this down just a little bit. Probably won't matter. This seems to go on just fine if it's pushed up towards the top. If I push it down towards the bottom a bit, it gets a slight rock to it, but I'm pretty sure it's, when the magnets are in, it's going to be held up near the top and perfectly flush like it is now. So because I have to do epoxy, which the difficult thing is I need to wedge stuff underneath this to get this area here perfectly level or as close as I can. So when I put some epoxy in, then put the magnets in, and then put more epoxy on the top to overfill it or get it as close to level as I can, it doesn't run one direction or the other. And then once that epoxy is dry, sand it so it's flush. And then I'll go ahead and toss this on, and hopefully the magnets, which I'm sure they will grab the piece and hold it in place there. Yeah, see, now I'm getting a little wobble. But if I well, it's weird because sometimes I get a wobble and sometimes I don't. Oh, yeah, now it's not wobbling. So it's just basic, yeah. So it's basically, I think that it's wobbling if it gets a little bit, it sits a little bit too low. But again, that's all going to depend on how the magnets hold it. And I'm pretty sure that it's wobbling back and forth either on this area that I did the seam work because it's a little bit high because of the melted plastic, or it's right here. This area is, in fact, I think it's more likely this area because when it's down, it's resting on this piece, and I think that this piece might raise up a little bit compared to this one, and so I think I just need to sand that. In fact, looking at it, it definitely does kind of look like, yeah, it does kind of look like this area is a little bit higher there in the center. So I might just need to sand that down a bit. But other than that, it feels really strong. It doesn't feel like it's going to break or come apart. So yeah, after the magnets, I'll be doing some initial filler work. These pieces print, each of the two pieces print upside down. And they use a support piece that's built into the model for this area here. And when you remove it, that area is a little bit rough, so it definitely needs filler inside there because it's kind of stringy because it's bridging across the support material. So I'll definitely be filling that with filler. Probably just the glazing putty and not the two-part filler, I think, at this point. And then the other area that's going to need some filler and some sanding is where this part glues to this part, and then where these two parts are glued together here and up here where it's a visible area, and down there at the bottom. As far as, like I said, I printed this at 0.2 resolution on the Prusa, and it is really nice. I mean, it's obviously, it's an angled piece, so there's stair stepping, but it's so fine that I don't think I'm going to put any filler on there at all. I think just a couple fairly heavy coats of primer is going to take care of that and be fine. Still need to do more sanding on these. Obviously, I haven't even started the other one, and this one, as in a video I did prior, you can see where I've sanded, and the transparent plastic with the light behind it, you can see the light coming through, which is kind of cool. But yeah, there's a lot of fine areas that I need to get into, and I need to put some filler, because no matter how you print this, there are angles on it that are going to have the stair-stepping kind of effect, because they're not printed, they're printed at an angle and not flat. So, and then we get to this. I didn't go back through my videos to see if I even had a video where I showed them in primer. I did this during a period recently where I didn't have any videos for a while. I did prime these, but I didn't make a video just to say, hey, I sprayed some primer on something. But I am making this video and adding this to it because I've done my first round of sanding. And I am quite happy with how these turned out for the first go at sanding. If you remember, there's 7 pieces to this thing. There's this big one here, big piece here, big piece here. That's 3. And then there's a side piece 4, side piece 5, side piece 6, side piece 7 to hold that all together. This again is the cut file version of the leg. If you have a 500 by 500 millimeter printer, you can use the Mark III one-piece leg and print that all in one piece. The reason why this is white down here is because it goes into the ankle, and I didn't want to add paint, which is going to make it thicker because it's a really tight fit into the ankle already. So I tried to keep the paint right about where the transition is to the ankle, so that when it's ready to be joined to the ankle, throw a bunch of glue inside the ankle, and I don't know how I'm going to do that without damaging the piece, but whack this thing down into the ankle, or push it, or whatever, to make sure it's all the way in the ankle. The tricky thing you have to remember about that is this cutout area here. There's a piece of plastic that goes around there, and it's kind of like, well, it's a thin flat piece that sticks up and goes all the way around. And so you have to put that on before you put the ankle on. If you don't, then you're going to have to take that piece, which prints as one round piece that slides over the bottom of the ankle. You'll have to take that piece and cut it so that you can get it around the ankle. So, yeah. So here you see what I did was I glued all the pieces together, and then I mixed up some 2-part body filler, 2-part Bondo body filler, and I went over all the gaps with that, and especially areas also this curve, because it's large stair stepping, because that piece that you print that goes on here, you print lying down, because the flat part that you glue up against these 2 pieces, it's a join that helps strengthen the join between 2 pieces here. You print it lying down, so it has to do stair stepping again as it makes this curve, so it prints in this orientation. And so the stair stepping was pretty evident, so I was a little bit worried that how it was going to turn out, and I am extremely happy with how it turned out on both of them. So I put the Bondo on it, and I sanded the Bondo down to make it as smooth a corner as I could get it. Same thing where this side piece is joining two pieces together. And Bondo on the back, because again, this is 3 pieces for the main structure of the leg. And Bondo here and here, just everywhere. I'm pretty sure I showed that in my video. Everywhere there was a join, I put that Bondo and then sanded it down. And then I did a couple heavy coats of primer. And today I sanded it with a 220 sanding sponge, and really am happy the way it turned out. The one thing about a sanding sponge I don't like is no matter how stiff the sponge is, as you're sanding, it's gonna wanna bend, unless you've got really steady hands, I guess. As you're pressing down on it, it's just gonna have a want to naturally bend on the sides instead of just staying perfectly flat. So the goal of this first coat of primer and sanding it is to see areas that are too high or low. So you can see, like along this edge where the primer is gone, that's a little bit high. And then, is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. So you would think on the back that this area is a little bit high because it sanded the primer off. That area is not high. I know it's not high. I saw it before I primed it that it was not high, and I can just feel it slightly rolls over. So I think this is just for me sanding, and just naturally wants to, between the sponge and shape of my hand and just whatever, it just naturally kind of went over and sanded that primer off, even though that area is not high. It is so slight that there's no way, if that just gets re-primed and then carefully sanded so it doesn't go down to the plastic and then painted with the final coat of paint, there's no way anyone's going to even notice that that's not flat unless they're touching the piece. It's literally, I mean, not that I have, a perfect black background or a T-square out here, but it's all of these areas, in fact, where you can see it went down to the plastic. Almost all of those areas, if you run your hand along it, you either cannot tell or can barely tell if it's lower or higher. That's how close it is. And so the way that I know that, apart from just feeling it, is the fact that when you spray, you get what they call the orange peel effect. So it's like right now it's got a really smooth finish. It's something I didn't bring a piece out that I haven't sanded yet. But it's got a nice smooth finish right now. But right after you paint it, it's bumpy, it's textured. It's got, depending on how close or how far away you are from what you're painting, and I did this outside, at some areas it was more modeled like the surface of an orange peel effect. In some areas it wasn't so bad. But the purpose of the first sanding is to sand everything down so that it's smooth, and then seeing where you have low areas or high areas. So if this was really dished, which it looks like it is a bit because you can see that it took the primer off the edges, but not the middle. So if my sanding sponge was actually, say, a sanding piece of steel that was perfectly flat, and I put perfect pressure on it, this would mean that this piece bows inward a little. And so you would need to add filler material, or depending if it's really light, just another couple coats of primer to build that up till you get to the point where you go back over it with a perfectly flat piece of sandpaper and it smooths all the primer out and doesn't show any plastic. But because I'm using a sponge, I know for a fact that there's some fold over happening. So what I'm relying on is visual and touch. When I run my fingers along this, there's only a couple small areas that I can feel, oh yeah, there's a little ding here. Or, oh yeah, that feels a little bit low there. Most of it, even though, like I said, you can see that it went through the primer, it feels smooth all the way across. And the primer is smooth all the way across. So it's none of these areas are so bad that it's going to require a bunch of filler to make them smooth. Most of these areas are just with another coat or two of primer will be fine. So after this first coat, like I said, get down to where you're starting to see plastic, to see where you have high or low spots. The next thing I'll do is put filler where I need to, places I can actually see and or feel are too low. Nothing really feels too high that I need to really sand it down all that much more. Same thing with this. That looks like, oh my goodness, that's really dished, but feeling that, I can't feel that transition. That feels really smooth. Now here, obviously, I think the camera's picking it up, there's a little cut there that could use a little bit of filler. So there's things like that. And there's a dent. Well, it looks like the camera might pick it up. There's a dent right here next to my thumb. That could put a little bit of filler in there to get that filled. And then sand that back down. And then these parts were on the print bed, so I don't even think I can get an area to show, but there are some print After Effects where the first layer, you can see the layer lines from the first layer. There's just a few little tiny ones of those around that I might put a little bit of filler just to get those filled in, but some of them are so light that another coat or two of primer should fill them in. That's how faint they are. So really happy that, I mean, I was worried because when it's all white, it's really hard to tell. Like at this angle, I can see there's a line right here. Okay, which again, that's this plate covers that, so you're not even going to see that. So it's not sticking up enough to make this plate not fit right. It's just enough that you would see it if it was on a piece that showed, like part of the side of the leg or something. If that had a line like that, then I would either fill it or sand it. But here I'm not going to worry. But when it's white, it's just really hard to see the areas that need work. Only if they're fairly extreme can you see them. So when I painted this, I was like, well, how much work am I going to be into for the next phase of going over it with the filler material and getting all the areas that when I went over it with the Bondo, the 2-part Bondo, didn't get enough on, or I sanded too much off before I primed or whatever, and I'm really happy with where it's at. Like I said, there are areas I can feel that are going to need some more filler, and then to be sanded again. But on the whole, this thing feels really nice. Feels like it turned out really good, both legs. So what I need to do, the magnets are repelling each other, so I can't actually put the two pieces evenly on top of each other. That's funny. Just remember, there are magnets here and here and here that hold the horseshoe on. Are they up here too? Yeah, here and here, I think. If I remember right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that hold the horseshoe over the top. And there's also a small one here that holds the booster on, or this holds the, I can't even remember. It's been so long since I've had the parts sitting on here. I have to go back and start rereading the instructions again for assembly, because it's been so long that I've been working on gluing and sanding and all that I can't remember what goes where, which is another part of the process. So obviously from looking, I can tell where I'm going to need to put some filler material, but there's areas where I can't tell because I don't remember how much of this you see. How much do I have to sand? I know I don't need to sand in these channels because that's just for wires to go, that then would go through here, that go to your motor. In fact, one is for wires and one I think is for a 232. If you're doing a 232 mod, you can put a metal rod down one end of it, the opposite from where you have the wires running to the motors and the feet. In the 232, that's why there's two channels. But it's like, I know there's a piece that goes in here, so I shouldn't have to like sand and even paint in here. And the horseshoe covers this whole area here, but I think you might be able to see down in here. So I think this needs to be painted blue, I think, because the booster cover thing, I think this needs to be painted blue, and maybe the channel as well, but I shouldn't have to sand the channel because it's just one of those, if you look kind of through an angle at the leg, you might see through the parts that are put on it and see the color underneath. But yeah, I need to figure all that out. What do I need to sand? Do I want to sand away? I see I've still got the glue in there, right, where I glued these two pieces together. There's still a ridge of glue in here too that I didn't bother sanding because, like I said, this one here you're not going to see because the horseshoe covers this area up. So why waste my time, working on that? But this one too, it's like, well, I think you can see through there a bit with the leg parts on, but I'm not sure how much. So I might need to sand some of that back, the glue ridge, where the glue squeezed out between the two parts and things like that. So also these, if you look at an angle here, these are rough inside because of the way this part prints like this. And so this bottom one is smooth, but the top one is a bridge. I did put support material in there, but still it's a bridge going across support material. So just printing like that. And so those need some filler to make them a bit smoother, but I have the pieces printed that go in there, so I'll hold them in there, and that'll give me a better idea of how much I need to do, how nice it needs to look. I see my primer didn't get all the way up in there because I had them sitting like this when I primed them. Kind of, did my best to squat down and get the can pointed up and spraying up in those areas, but obviously it didn't quite get there. So yeah, that's the next step, is for this anyway, is I think first thing I'll do is put the pieces on that make up the leg, so I know exactly what areas I need to do any work making prettier, smoother, so that all the areas that are going to be seen will be a smooth coat. And then, like I said, put filler everywhere that I need to. And then I'll sand the filler back down. And then I will be doing another couple heavy coats of primer. And this time, I don't think I'm even going to use a sanding sponge. I think I might do it by hand. I think I might just take 220 sandpaper and just do it by hand until I get rid of, again, that orange peel, so it's like it is now, where it's nice and smooth. And then maybe also then go over it with 400 grit. In fact, I might even try 400 grit to begin with. It's going to depend on how long that takes to get that textured finish off and down to smooth. And then at that point, they'll actually be ready for paint, which I haven't even bought the white paint yet. In fact, I only got one can of the blue paint because I had a coupon from an auto parts store and bought one can of that. So yeah, I feel like I'm making a little bit progress finally. Several weeks I wasn't getting anything done. And all this sanding and gluing just makes you think, oh, this is going to take forever. I really thought I'd get this whole thing done in a year. That ain't going to happen. I started sometime last summer. It's now spring of the year after, so I doubt I'll get it done in a year because, I have to have nice weather to do the painting. And then I have so much sanding and filling and sanding and priming to do. Although this, like I said, really happy with this, where I glued all the stuff together. I did one good coat of sanding it down. Then I did Bondo. Then I did another coat, or another pass at sanding it all down. And then I did my first primer spray. And now I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, I might be able to get it to the point where all the filler's on and sanded down to the point where another couple coats of primer and the things will be ready for paint. That would be awesome. But yeah, you think that's not gonna take that long. Why would that take that long? And then you realize, oh yeah, I have these to do, 2 of these, and the center foot, and I haven't glued any more rings of the body together yet. Those are just freaking me out because I'm worried that they're not going to line up right. And the fact that these outer foot shells didn't line up right is not making me feel any better about the body rings lining up right. But that's kind of that's in my near goal too, is the foot shells, because like I said, the other one is currently sitting gluing, and then hopefully tomorrow, if I have time before work, I'll do the plastic welding on the other one, and then let it sit so it all cools, and then hopefully glue this piece onto the shell of the other foot. So yeah, hopefully these 2 assemblies, and then maybe I'll get back to the body. I really would like to get back to the body because I've got the skirt and the first ring done, and I've printed the second and third rings. The second ring is ready to be glued together. The third ring is not, because the centerpiece where the utility arms come out needs a lot of attention to make it nice. And also the utility arms, I'm going to have to put some filler material on and sand those down so that I can make sure those fit with a little bit of extra clearance to cover for paint. Thanks, Jason, for reminding me about that. Utility arms that come out of R2's body panels, if you just sand them down and prime them so that there's just enough room for them to fit snugly when you then go to do your final coat of paint and clear coat, which I haven't decided if I'm doing clear coat or not, that's going to make them too thick where they might stick and not come in and out easily. So you want to make sure that you leave a little extra room on things that go together, if they're parts that move in and out of each other, to make sure that the paint thickness you're accounting for, and not just make them so that when they're like this that they fit. Bad example, because there's nothing that comes in and out of this that you need to take care of, but yeah, like say the piece that goes in here, if I leave this primer and I don't sand it at all, and then it gets another couple coats of primer because I don't sand it because nobody sees that area, and then I go to put that detail piece in that goes inside of there, which also needs to be primed and painted. Now all of a sudden all that paint has made it so thick that it might not fit. So you gotta be wary of that. Make sure that you're fitting things together before you do that final coat of paint, to make sure that you've got allowance for that final coat of paint. So anyway, there we are. I'm happy. I feel like I'm making progress. I feel like I wasted a week on these foot shells because, well, I did. I wasted a week in a roll of filament because I didn't print the right size the first time, and then I had to reprint them. But now this one's together and the other one is printed and gluing and will soon be together. And so that makes me feel happy. Along with, as I said, it doesn't look like I'm going to need to do a ton of work on these before putting the final coat of primer and giving a final sand to it. So very good news at last, after being not happy with the foot shells being messed up. I'm now in a better mood and getting a little bit more done. So apologies for it rains or it pours with the videos lately. Taking a couple weeks without making a video because I didn't make progress, or like I said, all I did was spray primer on some parts. And then I think this is like the third or fourth video this week because of the foot shell issue. But I just figure, again, if I can help anybody with my videos, that's the whole purpose. If somebody gets to a point and they come across one of my videos and they're like, oh, that's how that goes together, or that's a good idea, I hadn't thought of doing things that way. That's what these videos are for. So the doing one a week idea I originally had, I'm not going to bother about that anymore and just concentrate on if I have stuff to show, I'll make a video. If it's a small thing, I might wait till I have a few things done to show. But I am still working on the project.